Hi, this is Brendan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock blog, and I'm here with Joel and Adam. And tonight we're talking about John Wick, the 2014 action movie. It was directed by, and I'll probably pronounce this incorrectly, but Chad Stahelski. Is that correct, guys? And written by Derek Kolstad. In the film, an ex-hitman comes out of retirement to track down the gangsters who killed his dog and stole his car. Now, that's the IMDb breakdown. I think they actually did a pretty solid job on this one. We've been having some problems with the IMDb breakdowns, and
this is a
one,
pretty simple plot. I think. I don't think this was enough to confound IMDb this time.
So anyways, I mean, it doesn't really need much of an introduction. People know this movie. It really helped revitalize action movies in general around that time, which were suffering a lot. I want to know what you guys thought of it, because this was your first time seeing it, and it's a very unique action film. So I'm curious how you guys responded to it.
I'll take Adam's leftovers this time. Go ahead, man.
Okay, yeah. I mean, the first thing that's really striking about this movie is just the clarity of the action. I mean, it is fantastic. It's just it's like you always know what's happening. They never obfuscate things. They never do quick cuts. They never do shaky cam. It's like you feel like you feel like you're understanding exactly what John Wick is doing in every fight situation, because it's all so clear. They like you to understand the areas. When we first go to that club, you have a little sequence where you have the guy radioing all the security guys, so you're getting this little overview. It's like, oh, there's a VIP room. Oh, in the basement, there's this little bathhouse down in the basement. And that way you've got this little map in your head of the area before the action scene begins. It's just I mean, there's lots of things to like about this movie. The cast is fantastic. I didn't know, I knew Keanu Reeves was in this. Beyond that, I didn't know who was in it. But it's like every time someone shows up, it's like, hey, there's a fantastic casting choice. It's I had nothing against this movie. I just never got around to seeing it. But I'm like, man, I can't believe I've waited almost 10 years to watch this fantastic movie. I'll go to Joel now.
Yes, on all points. That's exactly, because like really early on, Willem Dafoe shows up, and I'm like, oh hey, Willem Dafoe, and then John Leguizamo shows up, and I'm like, oh, John Leguizamo's in this movie, and it just keeps doing that to me. Like the whole movie is it's consistently showing me stuff I want to see. Oh man, this is a movie, and I love this about it. It's really simple. You know the stakes. You have a clear and unambiguous emotional connection with the protagonist. And like everything's so clear. I can see it all. There's not a bunch of stupid close-ups that are like making it impossible for me to see what's going on. It's a movie that's willing to pull back and show me the whole shot, and it slows down, and like it's so simple and yet so elegant. Like it's like this magnificent grandfather clock of a movie. I understand everything about this. It's all familiar to me, and I'm just impressed at the workmanship. This is exactly the clock I wanted. So I was delighted by this film. I really enjoyed it. It's a great modern action film, a fantastic entry into the revenge film whatever, like library, I suppose. It's more Keanu Reeves action, which is always fun. And I also like that he gets his butt kicked a lot and has to go to the doctor. That's a really fun little moment. So I loved this film. I was enthralled.
Yeah, and I think that's worth talking about later, the doctor and the injury. But I didn't see it right away either. I was really turned off by a lot of the action movies at that time. As you guys can remember, I was constantly watching wuxia and things like that, and a lot of films from the 70s. And I never really liked the shaky cam, like you were saying, the quick cuts and things. Certain films could do it. There was like some of the Hong Kong movies really excelled at doing the quick cut editing, but they did it in a way where you did not lose clarity. And American action movies, by this point, I was just routinely frustrated and almost getting like motion sickness trying to watch them. And this came out, and I kind of assumed it would be the same thing. And so but then I kept hearing all these great things about it. So, it took me a few years to watch it. And I remember it was just like To me, what it looked like was somebody who appreciated older style movies making a new movie in like the new ways. Do you know what I mean? So there are things there is CG in this movie. It's not saturated with it, but it's there where it needs to be. There's they do use filters. They do a lot of things that people expect in modern movies that maybe wouldn't be my first preference, but there's definitely like a respect for like an older style of doing action scenes, and like you're saying, the longer shots, the fact that they're often like wide frame, they're not fast cut. The camera is like liquid. The camera just is like perfect. You never get a sense of things being shaken or disrupted. It feels very, very liquid clear, the whole film. And the action sequences are really well choreographed. The fight sequences, you can identify the arts that they're using. Do you know what I mean? It's sometimes that's not easy to do in a movie. In this one, it's fair. You can discern the difference in this. And there's a trivia piece on the Prime thing, which kind of triggered this thought. But you can discern the difference between judo and Brazilian jiu-jitsu in this, which I think in a lot of movies you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between those two just by the way films tend to be, put together. Also, I think this movie has a lot of interesting chemistry between the antagonist and the protagonist. And it's got a backstory that's, now we would probably say like twisting the trope, but it's not done in a way where it's just like they flop it. Instead of the wife being murdered and him having to get revenge for her, it's the dog that represents his grief for the wife. Like it's part of his grieving process. And so, and also his car, which is sort of the thing he's not, his wife even kind of like chides him for having any attachment to the car. But I really liked that, because I thought that the sequence in the beginning where he's just getting the dog was really effective. Like that, number one, they got the cutest dog in the world. And it's almost like they did an ensemble casting where they got the dog and Keanu Reeves together and made sure that they had chemistry. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It was, I don't think I've seen a movie before where there's been that much chemistry between an actor and the dog. And I don't know, it just worked for me. I liked the sort of slow walk into the movie. I think it's a very good film. I'm generally a fan of older movies, and this is like a newer movie. I know 2014, but to me that's a newer movie. A newer movie that can appeal to me.
Yeah, on the dog thing, it's like I knew that the instigating incident was this dog getting killed, but I didn't know it was this adorable little puppy for one thing, and that it was a dog that represented his dying wife's final gift to him. I'm like, man, you really. I was thinking of something like the dog. It was a dog. He had a larger sized dog, and when they came to steal the car, they shot him because the dog was a threat. And it's like, nah, they just kill the dogs. They're assholes just to make you hate them even more.
Yeah.
The dog was literally whimpering when they killed it.
It's terrible. And like, honestly, you couldn't write a more despicable villain than that kid.
No.
What a piece of trash. And even the movie takes him out like the trash. They just treat him as this object, this object of hatred. And honestly, like, I understand that my buttons are being pushed here, that I'm on the strings, but I'm fine with it. I hate that guy.
Even his father doesn't like him, right? Like, even his father's got contempt for him. I did like how artfully they handled the dog being killed, because I heard that too. I heard, he the revenge is all about because they killed his dog, and you hear that, you're like, well, that sounds pretty stupid. Like, he's killing. Well,
I didn't think it sounded stupid, but I just,
but you know what I mean.
It's a dog person, but it's just that I didn't realize, that wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to have him kill his dog. They added all this weight on top of the dog to make it even bigger.
When I first heard that it was his dog, what I was imagining that it was going to be a lot more funny. Do you know what I mean? Like, you killed my dog. Now like I thought it was a send up of the whole revenge thing. Gotcha. The movie that kept popping up in my mind, I think it was called Shoot 'Em Up. Do you guys remember that movie?
Yeah, I didn't actually see that one. Yeah,
but that kind, I thought it was going to be that level of okay, this is how serious we're taking the action genre. But I was surprised how well they made it a serious thing. So that's what I liked about it. That it was like, oh no, this is like I understand we can have a philosophical discussion about whether he should go on the revenge path over this dog being murdered. But I understand why that dog meant so much to him. And I understand why a man who was a killer would go on a killing spree after that dog had been murdered, so it made a lot of sense. I think that was the other thing. I really liked the way they built up the legend of his character in the movie. That was super effective.
I do think the name they chose for him kept reminding me of that one song by The Who, though, which kind of messed it with. I know that's not the origin of the term Baba Yaga, but I gotta tell you, that's my origin of the term Baba Yaga. So
okay, yeah, I didn't have any issue with that. What I liked was they kept talking about all these things he had done, and there were these but you kind of had to piece together in your own head all of the details and get an image of him and of what the past was. And so there wasn't anything to kind of deflate the legend that they were building. Do you know what I mean? Like just this past that wasn't just about him, but also about Vigo building up his empire. And so I really liked that.
Yeah, that was really cool. This movie does a lot of like real screenwriting tropey kind of things. They literally have a kick the dog moment. Honestly, because I've been studying screenwriting lately. I've been writing plays lately. And so like one of the things I've been studying is the Dan Harmon story circle. And this is like a paint by numbers plot. It literally has the acts, the exact time signatures, like everything you expect to find in a script is here. And on the one hand, like I want to say, oh, this is all lazy and cliche, but the fact is, the reason those things are used is because they work. This movie is very simple. When you look at it, it really doesn't try to do anything complicated. This is a man who is a legendary killer. He's a one-man army, and they killed his dog, which represents his dead wife. He goes back into the literal criminal underworld, and he shoots a bunch of dudes because he's this unstoppable force of nature. They get him into a third act bind. He gets out of it with the help of his friend. Like they have a climactic final battle. Like every single thing is like one for one, like, just screenwriting 101. It's 1-for-1 101. And yet it all works because it's done competently, and it's done with it's executed well with good actors. And it has enough boldness to just kind of put it in front of you and be like, no, this is what it is. We don't have to overanalyze this. You can just do it well. And they do. They carry it off beautifully.
I would also add to that, I think, and we've had discussions about structure and how good or bad or whatever structure is, but I think when we're talking about structure doesn't make a good movie for you, right? Structure can make a movie that follows a trajectory that the audience is anticipating that works. But it's sort of like if I give you the outline of songwriting, if I say, like intro, verse, chorus, verse, or pre-chorus or whatever
bridge.
That doesn't allow you to write a good song. All that does is it gives your good song structure, huh?
It's the emotion involved. It's like it's got to be a meaning to it. It's because to give you a trope. One note I made on this very point was that we have the classic. We talked about this with the Mad Max review, the walking away from explosion thing. And this kind of does it when he sets the stuff on fire and walks away from the stuff in the bank. And it's like so many movies, hundreds of movies have done the walking away from an explosion thing, and it's become this boring cliche. But it's like John Wick is literally, it's a character moment. He's literally, he's got a fortune here, and he is not at all interested. I don't give a fuck about any of this stuff. I am just setting it on fire and walking away. Yeah. So the shot has meaning. It's not just, it looks cool to have an explosion there. That's why this movie works.
Yeah, it's not done brainlessly. It's done as a character moment. It was done in the character moment in Mad Max too. Them walking away from the explosion showed that they didn't care about the stakes. That wasn't the important part. They'd done their job and they're moving on.
Yep.
And if you just walk away from an explosion to look cool for the camera, that's brainless. This had enough thought that it made sense. That's a brilliant point. Well said.
Well, and I think with that one in particular, the other thing is that there was more to that we learned later, which also, so it was sort of like they were saving details for you. You didn't, in a bad movie, maybe the priest tells you all of the stuff that's in the vault, but we don't find out all the stuff. John Wick doesn't find out all the stuff until his life is on the line and he's strapped to a chair. And so, I think they're pretty, it just feels well crafted in that respect to me, And yeah, I would say emotion. I would also say this is kind of an inspired movie, especially when you consider what we were getting at that time. Because there were a lot of movies that followed this structure at that time, but were horrible, right? That were just like not watchable. And this was also a movie that people didn't expect to do well, right? This was like the Keanu Reeves wasn't even like a big draw anymore at that point. And so it just kind of took everybody by surprise, I think. And I think it's because it was familiar, like you could see, oh yeah, I can recognize things that they're drawing on. But the overall concoction was like an inspired gathering of sources of inspiration. Do you know what I mean? It just kind of all worked, and none of them overpowered one another. So it just blended perfectly.
Yeah, I noticed a surprise inspiration that made perfect sense once I read it. Was the writer director one of his inspiration was Miller's Crossing, and I was like, I totally see. I didn't think about it watching it, but that makes just the world it takes place in and the way the characters interact with each other. I'm like, yeah, it's a very different movie than Miller's Crossing, but man, it's there. It's like just the relationships between characters had that feel to it.
Well,
the whole energy of it being a lived-in world was really big, I think.
Yeah.
You know, like he calls the cleaners who he knows, and like there's a rapport there. It's like, oh, you back in business? He talks to the cop outside. They're responding to the noise complaint. He's like, so you working? And he's like, no, just sorting things out. He's like, okay, I'm just gonna leave. This didn't happen. Everything.
I love Leguizamo, it's like I felt like Leguizamo might show up again in the movie or something. No, it's just a very going back, like the Miller's Crossing, the Coen brothers. When the Coen brothers have a character in a movie for 30 seconds, it feels like a freaking character, even if it's just the person they rent a car from or something. And it's like this movie had this feel where every single character was a character. And
I agree.
They used them in some way.
Well, and also they were able to get away with this weird thing. Like I would probably normally complain about the way it handled this criminal underworld, where it was handled there was a sense of humor about it, right? Like the scene that Joel just talked about, where he's like, I forget what the cop's name was, but he knew him by name, and they're just, and it was like, and it was a really weird scene, but it worked somehow. It didn't set off any alarm bells in my head that this shouldn't be happening in this movie, and I think that. Part of the reason why is it's able to do that, but it's also able in that world to have those very serious moments with like the John Leguizamo character, where you know what I mean. And and I think, and Miller's Crossing I think is a good, the Coen brothers are maybe a good reference point in general because they somehow are able to have a blend of humor and serious drama, and you don't question it.
Yeah, the cop scene's interesting because I saw that the writer director, he said that was one of the first things they shot was the stuff at that house, and he was feeling like none of this is working. This movie's a failure. I'm in over my head. And then they shot that one scene, and he's like, oh, this is gonna work.
Okay.
The Coen Brothers inspiration.
that was the scene where he's like, great, okay, he got his confidence.
It is really Coen Brothers-y in the middle, isn't it? Like it's around the nightclub scene. That whole action scene, almost when you look at it, it's a really solid, like dramatic action scene all the way from start to finish. It has good dramatic stakes. It's well acted. It's thrilling. But if you look at it in just a slightly different light, it's a comedy scene. It's a turkey shoot of this impossibly capable one-man army going through and just murdering this whole really Russian cartel single-handedly. And then it ends with him like getting doctored up, and there's this like weird familiarity where he goes back to the hotel and he's bleeding from gunshot wounds, and he's like, "Hey, do you have a doc on premise?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, we'll send one up." And it's all just it's funny.
No Taylor is that good line too.
Yeah, like
Lance Reddick, man, I was so happy to see him pop up in this movie, man.
Yeah, he's great in this. He's great.
I won't. I'm not going to spoil it because I read another one of our films that I don't think you've seen has him in it, and it's great.
Okay, great.
The doctor scene. The doctor scene is interesting too because it is that perfect blend of like this is kind of ridiculous, right? Like there's a doctor on call for all of these hired assassins that live in this highly elaborate underworld, right? At the same time, like what he was. I found the scene where the doctor was stitching him up and giving him medication and asking him what he was going to be doing and then giving him pills to help him through it to me, I think anybody who's done anything that involves athletics and has had to operate while they were injured understood that scene. Do you know what I mean? Where it's like, okay, he fell from a balcony onto a dance floor. He should be really hurt, right? So, the movie obviously hand waves a certain amount of that. Like, he'd probably be in the hospital after that fall. But it's believable enough that he's fighting injured for the rest of the movie. I like that they're able to do that. A
thing about Keanu Reeves' performance in this I like is that you always see the effort. Like the easy thing when you make a movie like this where he's superhuman is to make everything like, hey, this is no trouble at all. It's effortless. But you always, you mentioned something this being somewhat Jackie Chan-like. It's Jackie Chan always feels like he's 1 second away from complete disaster. And I feel like there was a level of that to this performance. It's like John Wick, he's getting out of breath at times. When he's wrestling with people, you really see him struggling. It's like he's winning. When you watch sports, it's like the thing is you're watching athletes at the absolute edge of human capability. And it's like you could feel that. It's like this, it was hard for him to do things like this in this movie. And that makes it feel more impactful than going, I'm just zapping people, boom, boom, it's no problem.
Even the way he stands with the gun, it looks proficient, but he looks like a guy who is carrying age. Do you know what I mean? He's weighed down by the years. And I really like that because it definitely was believable. It was like, there's something about the way he's standing. I don't know what it is, but he looks like an older guy trying to do a younger man's job a little bit. And I thought that was interesting.
Having been in those shoes now, he really does have that stance.
We're at the age where we're starting to get maybe it's resonating because
this was easier 10 years ago. Yeah,
exactly.
That actually brings me to one of the things I loved about this movie. It lets the stuff that makes sense that sucks in the real world just suck in this universe. It doesn't flourish really at all. Like you said, he falls off a second-story balcony and he lands hard, and the camera just follows him down, and you see him hit. And then he just curls up in the fetal position, winded and broken. And he's like, nope, that's it. I'm done. And he limps out. Beautiful. The whole movie's like that. It's not, he doesn't like spring back up he's just like, nope. Doctor time. Need painkillers. He goes and drinks. Car crashes, gunshots, getting choked, anything that happens in this movie. It's put like right center frame. It's deliberate. It's slow and takes its time. And it lets you know, like, hey, you know what would suck? Being hit with a car. You know what really hurts? When someone hits you really hard. That hurts. You bleed. What if you got stabbed? I bet that would really hurt for a long time. Yup. Thank you, movie. Thank you for letting the stakes just reflect what they would really be. I mean, okay, it's a movie. He's a one-man army. Okay, yes, granted. But that's the only suspension of disbelief. When a car hits a concrete, pillar, it breaks and you have to get out of it. It's wonderful.
Well, any movie, so a lot of action movies have one-man armies, right? Like Commando, Rambo. That's like every this is like a long lineage of movies. There's tons
Die
of
Hard, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. But in order to do that effective, you have to I can believe in Commando because Arnold Schwarzenegger is such an unusual physical specimen, right? Like that's the thing that sells that. With John Wick, it's a combination of the building of the legend, right? Like the legend that they cultivate at the beginning of the movie that's so important. It's the kind of stuff that you're talking about with the action sequences, and it's Keanu Reeves' physical performance that's geared more towards his body type, right? Like it just all works and you buy it, even though obviously a normal person who did this would be dead within the first 3 minutes of the movie, right?
Nobody would get out of the first action scene. You'd be toast.
And I liked the martial arts they gave him. What it looked like to me was he had this nice blend of kind of, I don't know what kind of striking he was doing. It wasn't immediately obvious to me, but he was doing striking and a lot of judo, and they were mixing it with the
judo
gun.
Was really obvious.
Yeah, the judo looked good. The judo is something I actually have some experience with. Not a lot, but enough that it was kind of popping out at me a little bit, and I really liked it. When I was watching the movie, one of the things that I thought that I had was, this is why I liked judo in the first place. It's got this it's like a grappling style for a striker, if that makes sense. It has a little bit more of an impact. But I thought that that the way that they wove the gun use in there was good too. You know, it is very, to me, I would go like, to me, it's kind of like reminiscent of like John Woo movies or something. Do you know what I mean? Just that like very artful use of firearms, but they were taking it to a level where it was, I don't know, quite interesting. There was like this, I don't know how to put it, but it was like he instantly understood the physics of where the bullet needed to be. And that was sort of the thing that made it work. Like the scene where the guy's rolling over the hood of his car and he just fires the gun.
Yes.
That's a great scene.
Yeah.
Yes.
Again, wonderfully not overstated, not over embellished. A guy's on my car and I want him to be shot with bullets.
There are a lot of points where I just rewound about 10 seconds to watch little action sequence again. And like, I mean, everything is so perfectly choreographed, and Keanu's, execution of those things. Like I said, you feel him kind of making these quick decisions in time. 'Cause I mean, it doesn't feel choreographed watching it. It just feels he does it in a way that's
spontaneous. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like he's making those decisions in the moment, and it's fantastic.
And that's really important. That's really important because it'll look like a choreographed dance.
Yes.
If it doesn't do it, you need to feel the decisions being made. You need to feel the reaction. I 100% agree with that.
Keanu Reeves just doesn't. I mean, he does get a lot of credit for it, but I feel he still doesn't get enough credit for what a good physical actor he is. That is like such a hard thing, and it's like people are always like, nah, he's just amazing at the action stuff. It's I don't know.
Well, the movie does a lot of like little things that kind of let you into their world. That window into his decision-making process that you see visually communicated and it's never like spelled out. There's that, and then there's a lot of little things like he never shoots somebody once and they flip over and faint, right? Like he shoots them and it's clear he's wounded them, and then he shoots them a couple more times. And a lot of times they're on the ground, where a normal action movie would be like, no, they're on the ground, that's the end. And he looks over at them, realizes that there's enough life in them to be an issue, and he shoots them in the head and does a kill shot to make sure they're dead.
Yeah, it's the Miller's Crossing line. Always put one in the brain. It's to go back to that again.
Yeah, and again, you wouldn't. That's a subtle inspiration, but like it communicates something to you whenever you're watching it, because you don't think about like, oh yeah, in the Matrix you got shot, you just flip over and faint. It's like no. Like killing someone is a grisly business, and it's something that this movie is like, okay, actually making certain a trained professional lifetime murderer at the peak of their career, like putting them in the ground, even if they're just a faceless goon, which the very first action scene is faceless goons. They got the masks on, they're faceless.
Yeah.
The movie tells you that they're dangerous as hell. He's just this unbelievable murder machine. And he's not unbelievable because he's superhuman. He's unbelievable because he thinks a little faster, he's more strategic, and like he just kind of has a plan to win. He's thorough.
Well, and like they say, the force of will, his force of will too, I think is well.
That was a good line early in the movie. It really. Also, I love that later on, it makes fun of people who play video games a lot by putting the loser characters playing video games, and the first one to die in that compound gets shot through the brain because he's playing a video game. I'm like, I feel a little attacked, movie, but whatever.
That was funny, though. I thought that was funny.
It was fun.
Well, I also like the kid getting rattled by it too. You can tell because he was literally in a gunfight the night before, just having this continual gunfight. This video, it's like, turn that game off. I was like, that was just a nice little character note on top of it too.
I want to give a lot of props to that actor, because like that's a tough role to sell, where you're constantly a worm.
Yeah.
He's the guy who played Reek in Game of Thrones, right? Is that who he was?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that's kind of his forte, is that type of character.
The man knows his trade. Yeah, he's outstanding.
Well, he's got the face for it. You know what I mean? Like it's like some people are built to play villains. Some people are built to It's like the guy who played trumpet in A Moment of Romance, right? I don't know if you guys remember that one. But
I've seen it. I have it. I own it. But
A Moment of Romance is the one where the motorcycle gangs and the
I remember who's trumpet in that?
He's the antagonist. He's like the really unreasonable gangster.
Oh yeah,
he's always shouting at people and has like I think Jim was on the podcast with us and he said it was a face that must be punched, and he gave us the German term for it. But he's just got one of those faces where I just
here in the States we just call that the Jared Leto face. But moving on.
Is that, I thought Jared Leto was supposed to be like a pretty boy. He's supposed to be the punchable face guy.
I want you to remember that in the movie in which remember, in the movie in which he was a pretty boy, at the apex of his prettiness, his face was punched into Hamburger. That was Fight Club.
Yeah, I remember that. But the whole point is got punched in the face because he was attractive, not because he had a face that was punched.
Well, that's the thing. It's never not been a face that must be punched. Even though
the reasons have changed.
I know. Okay, these rules are upside down, but I'll go with it. I mean, I think of like the guy from Karate Kid. What's his name? The guy who plays the Kreese character. That's like a face that must be punched kind of
guy. It's it goes back to our saying every single casting choice in this movie is completely perfect. I can't find it flaw.
What did you think of Ian McShane in the?
Oh hell yeah, Ian McShane. I mean, I going back to PBS in the '80s watching Lovejoy. I mean, I've been an Ian McShane fan, so when he popped up, I'm like, oh, there's another one.
He really worked in that role. Like that's a really unusual role where he has to be this like. I don't know, he's like this suave like guy in the underworld who just has so much power, but all this charisma, and I really liked him.
The combo of him and Lance Reddick together is the two people we see from the Continental. It's like, I like the fact Lance Reddick, it's like he's the guy who's there to he's serving you, he's giving you every need, but at the same time that he's a powerful person in his own right. It's like don't mess with this guy, even though he is here to serve you.
And we will learn more about that in later movies.
Excellent.
But the Continental in general, I thought was really a good touch to the film. It just gives it this nice center where you're able to understand, like you're able to understand a lot of the rules of the world through the Continental, which is nice. And it has, one of the fun sequences in the movie where what's her name, Mrs. Perkins, is that her name, Mrs. Perkins? Yeah. She sneaks into his room, and it's just really interesting the way that's handled. And then the poor guy ends up in charge of detaining her. I liked her character because you really despise her. Do you know what I mean? You really want her to die. Yeah.
So good.
Fantastic heel. And she's a heel for a reason. There's a really good selection of villains in this movie, which really helps it. But as a pure heel, she's fantastic. Because you're right. She's almost everything you hate about a character. She's duplicitous and unfortunately capable. I got a real Anton Chigurh kind of vibe out of that scene where she gets out of the handcuffs and shoots the guy. I was like, that's a Chigurh move right there. You got a hell of a playbook to be stealing from, lady. She breaks the rules. She's present in the scene where your favorite character dies.
Yeah, that's the big thing. The Willem Dafoe death. Even though Vigo does it, you kind of blame her. Do you know what I mean? Just because of her presence.
The Defoe part was great because it's like I was beginning to suspect he's doing this on purpose, isn't he? But I wasn't 100% sure. It's like, are they showing that he's incompetent, or are they showing that he's actually just pretending to be trying to kill him, but is actually protecting him? That was that was fun.
They keep you guessing until John Wick's in the chair. And okay, no, he's on John's side. Got it.
Yes, that was the reveal. Yes.
And Defoe's decision for like how he played that character, like he has this kind of deadpan expression a lot of the time. It really added to that ambiguity of like, why is this guy, like even the scene where they're at the where he's at the funeral and he's like, what do you really want here? And he's like, oh, I just came to check up on an old friend. Turns out, he just came to check up on an old friend, but then plants this doubt in your mind the whole movie.
Yeah.
Right, because you're especially in the scene after that where Vigo puts the hit out on him and he goes to him first and he's like, this is an exclusive contract. I need you to kill John Wick because I know you can do it. And he's like, consider it done. And it puts a seed of doubt in your mind where it's like, hey, wait a minute. Was that rivalry always kind of there in this dude's head? Is this just like finally him getting the chance? No, they're just pals, his buddies.
Yeah, I like that, and I mean, it was sad that Willem Dafoe had to die in this movie. We don't get more Willem Dafoe, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know.
But he's really effectively used, and so I think it was appropriate for them to kill his character just for the story to work.
Get up and fight. It's like, screw this. I'm just gonna die fighting. Was a nice touch too with his character.
Yeah, I'm gonna die anyway. I'm gonna die kicking ass. Willem Dafoe gets to go to
he kind of won. Like in terms of like who won the scene, his character kind of wins the scene, right? So
pretty constant state for Willem Dafoe to win whatever scene he's currently in.
That's true. So, yeah, I swear he is so. It's just. Willem Dafoe, man. Anytime he's in a movie, just from that funeral scene, it's just the second he comes on screen, he is just. I don't know. There's just something amazing about him as an actor.
Yeah,
sucks you, man.
Yeah, he works in anything. Like I don't think I've seen a movie where I've been like tired of his performance or anything like that. And he's been in a wide range of movies too. It can be any kind of film. I like the guy who played Vigo too. I thought that was an interesting casting choice. I don't really know the actor, but I felt like I had to believe this guy's like a father. I have to believe he's the head of a criminal empire, and I have to believe that he's like John Wick's good friend, but can also pose a threat to John Wick. Do you know what I mean? And it was like I don't know if you guys remember the final scene in Commando. I always had an issue with the Bennett character because you never feel like Bennett is a worthy opponent for Arnold in that movie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's not built like Arnold. He's not much of a personality. You know, he just doesn't feel like a worthy opponent. This guy felt like he transitioned into a worthy opponent in that fight sequence where the whole movie you're kind of like, I wonder what Vigo's abilities are as a criminal. You know what I mean? You're not really sure. And then you kind of start seeing it. Like at one point, he doesn't rip his shirt off or anything like that, but he flexes he puts his shoulders back like that. And you realize, this guy's has a physique that's, like I would expect a criminal to have. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a tattoo there. There's a, physical, he looks like he's solidly built, but it's all kind of concealed earlier in the movie.
You see him punch his kid in the stomach really hard, and this kid throws up. But that kid's soft as a marshmallow.
Yeah.
Like you never get the feeling that's like you feel like you could do that. Like stiff breeze can make this kid throw up from stomach pains. But yeah, like you get the feeling from Vigo that like he built himself up. Like there's not a lot of talk about what he inherited. There's a lot of talk about what he built and how he made it. So even though like at this point he's successful and he's clearly a guy that surrounds himself with talent rather than being the guy with talent, you get the feeling he can still get the job done. Yeah. And the ultimate fight scene is more of a battle of wills than anything else, because at this point, like John Wick has single-handedly torn his way through Vigo's entire empire. He's feeling the hurt, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that Vigo's able to kind of go toe-to-toe with him makes a little more sense at that point, since there's clearly a disparity in them. Vigo still pulls a knife, though, because it's like, okay, I can't beat John in a fist fight, but I might be able to kill him.
No, and I thought so. One of the things I liked about that sequence too was his attitude during the fight, where he had this kind of borderline about to fall into laughter that was a little bit unsettling. Like he just got the impression that like he's either really afraid and like that's how he's coping with the nerves, or this guy has been in this so often in the past that he's like in his element now, and it's like he feels comfortable. And so you don't know which it is. That's what I liked about that.
It's great because he's got to the point where he has nothing left to lose. His empire's in ruin. His son is dead. Like all of his plans have fallen apart, and he's just like cackling because it's like, yep, John's still going. Yep. There's some note of admiration about it. Like he gives him the guy the gun, and he's like, yeah, good luck, dipshit.
Yeah, he's actually in a bad position too. It's like it's like, is he just gonna let John Wick kill his son? It's like that's not even though his son's a complete asshole. It's like that's still a complicated thing he kind of gets roped into this situation because of his idiot son. So I mean, he's a bad person, so he did deserve it. But
yeah, and I did kind of wonder about his motivation there, because it is like, I mean, I think he must have been having a lot of mixed emotions over the course of the movie, would be my guess.
Oh yeah,
because I think a part of him seemed to acknowledge that John Wick was a little bit in the right, sort of by the code of the conduct that they live by.
Where I told them got Wick in the chair, and he's like, it's like, it's just a dog. It's just, can't you let this go? It's like he's trying to literally. It's like I to an extent I can see, you're asking me to give my son to you to die, over a dog.
Yeah.
I've never wanted a villain. Like, I've never sided with a villain more than Vigo in that scene where I'm like, I get where you're going, John, but like, man, give it up.
Well,
like,
also,
seriously, it's so reasonable. It's great.
Well, also, I mean, so one thing I read in the Wikipedia, I don't know how accurate this is they wanted to show a man who found redemption and then lost it. And so I think that's kind of, when you think about it from that angle, he really is like, we're seeing it from all John Wick's perspective. So it all looks right. But Vigo is trying to reason with John from the very beginning. He's trying to pacify him, and
he calls it, let's work this out, let's make this right. And John says nothing. It's like he doesn't give him an inch to negotiate or anything. But I think from John's perspective, though, it's like his wife dies, he's got nothing to live for. He gets this puppy, and the puppy starts to become, he wakes up the next morning. He's like, oh, I got to take this dog out. So I'm doing something. I'm living again. It's like, I've got a reason to get up in the morning, and then that gets taken from him. And now his reason to live is, I am going to kill all these bastards. It's like, that's the only reason he has to get up in the morning, is to kill these people.
But I guess what I'm saying is that also, even though he's,
let's say it's right. I say that's a reason. That's all.
No, and I agree with you. I mean, I think it 100% works. I guess just from just thinking about the movie, I'm sort of led to the conclusion, well, John Wick is in some ways kind of the bad guy here, in that he murdered countless people, like so many people, like dozens. It's got to be dozens, right? Like, I don't know. I didn't tally it, but it's got to be.
Yeah, how many of those guys who are just for security at the club did he kill? It's like, it's just some dude who has a job working security at a nightclub. It's
so if it was just between him and the kid, then it would be one thing. But because he's got to rip through a whole, he kills a priest who, I mean, obviously he's a very corrupt priest and all that.
Yeah.
But that's still, I think that was still a real priest who was,
that gave me pause when he just goes into the church and just pops the priest in the leg. It was just like, whoa, okay.
And also he doesn't, it's not like he shoots the priest in the head. The priest says, if you do make me go in there, he's going to kill me. And he says, like something like, I forget what he says exactly. But
I think is literally what he says. What do you think I'm going to do?
And then sure enough, that's exactly what happens. They just shoot him in the back of the head. So, I feel like, I don't know, it's just one of these movies where, and I think especially as the series goes on, you start to really think about this more, where you're like, wait a second, if he just stopped like 10 minutes ago, this would have, a lot more people would be alive right now.
Well, I mean, it's not like he got these skills through being a good person either. I mean,
so that's the point that the guy makes when he's in the chair, where he says this life comes back, it infects you. It, he's like, it gets into everything and all the people that you love. So I think that it still has this interesting moral compass to it, where even though you're rooting for John Wick, you kind of know, like, he's not a great guy. Like, he's a, I think that makes it more interesting.
Exactly.
Because there's layers to it. But yeah, I guess the other thing that I did want to mention, it came up when I was watching it on Prime on the trivia, this is what sort of keyed me to it. But I guess the Russian guy, he did Sambo as a martial art. So that's it's like a Russian, I think it's like a Russian wrestling type thing. I don't know exactly what it is. It's probably similar to like Sanda and stuff like that, maybe. But the woman, Mrs. Perkins, she was doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the scene with Keanu Reeves, while he was largely doing judo. And that was kind of like an interesting decision, because she's smaller than him and she's a woman. And so having her do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu makes a lot more sense. It's sort of like the stereotype is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is an art for the smaller guy to take out the bigger guy. And judo to a degree is too, but it's also, throwing somebody over your shoulder onto the ground. So, but I don't know. I liked those touches.
It makes a lot of sense that style would be less effective against someone who's smaller than you, because like I studied judo, and it works better whenever your opponent's bigger than you, because they have more to lose. You have more leverage on them. You can get closer down to the lower part of the center of gravity. But if your opponent's smaller and lither than you, and it just hits you directly with a lot of force, that shit's hard to counter with judo. So like that was a good fight scene as a result.
Yeah, I thought that was a really fun fight, the one in the hotel. It was, And again, she was such a heel, like you were saying, that you're just like really rooting for him to like, to fight her. I just thought it was a very effective scene overall. But yeah, I don't know. Anything else we want to get into? We've actually been going on for 45 minutes, so we have quite a discussion.
This movie is fantastic. I don't even know. Like, I could just kind of talk about every single frame of this movie, and it's weird because, again, like, I want to go back to this. This is not complicated. Usually I like stuff that I have to overthink or stuff that's abstract or, vague or artsy. Like, that's my kind of jam, I like stuff that challenges me. This movie sort of just delivered itself to me like a delicious cake, and I just ate the whole goddamn thing. It's amazing.
The complexity is in the execution. I mean, it's one thing to say this is simple, but it's like the action scene. You talk about formulas. It's like, yeah, anyone could do an action movie formula, but being able to create the kind of action scenes this movie does is hard. There's no roadmap. You can just copy and get an action scene like this. It's
easy to get wrong. It's so easy to like just get it like. Everybody would want to make an action scene like this, but I feel like most people don't. It ends up falling short either in the performance or in the composition of the fight sequence.
Well, just creating the sequence itself is hard. I mean, you have to think about what are all the cool things John Wick is going to do in this scene, and what are people. I mean, it requires. You can't just. I mean, you can rip off things from other movies, but that's
the devil. And I think part of what makes it. I think the guy who directed it was a fight choreographer, so I think that's part of why.
Yeah,
I could be wrong because I'm not very familiar with him, but I'm pretty sure he was a fight choreographer. So I think it's kind of like when a Yuen Wu-ping movie comes out. There's a certain attention to the action that you would just expect because that's his. Even if it's a bad Yuen Wu-ping movie, the action is going to be good. And here, I mean, I agree with. I don't know. I think that what you're really seeing is probably experience and craft. Where somebody's just competent at writing that kind of stuff, or at least it's maybe not writing it, but planning it. That's the. I had no objections to the action sequences, and usually that's like the first thing that I have a critique of in a lot of modern movies. So.
I usually hate actions. In theory I like action movies, but most action movies have relatively boring action scenes when it comes down to it. It's like, okay, when can we get back to the plot? Okay.
Well, this is what a good action movie should do, which is it uses the action to further the plot. It tells you about the characters. Like, who's that one guy that kicks John Wick's ass in the nightclub, and then later on he hits him with a car, and then finally later on Wick's able to best him to just barely in this murderous.
Oh, I can't remember, but I know.
But I don't know anything else about that guy, right? I don't know, like, what does he have a wife? Like, what's his motivation? No, dude, he's just the best goon, right?
Yeah.
But he has so much presence in the movie because he's present in the action scenes in a way that rivals John. And then he sticks out.
Then there's the other guy, the guy played by the Mayhem character. The guy the guy from Mayhem commercials. Let me see if I can find his name. Dean Winters, the Dean Winters character. He's like, in the credits, he's his attorney, but in the movie, I feel like he really plays more as like a number 2 henchman.
Yeah, he's number 2.
But he seemed like a guy who was just not equipped for the criminal underworld that much, and was irritated by a lot of the habits that the boss had. I don't know. I like that dynamic.
It was a good dynamic too. It was, because that guy's such an asshole. He's almost like the American of the movie. Like, how a lot of movies they'll be like, if it was like a James Bond movie, you might have that one like Texan ass American in it. I love those characters. I like seeing myself represented as a stereotype. It makes me happy. And this guy was perfect. He was overtly racist. He was dismissive of things that weren't like familiar to him. He was competent, but nowhere near as competent as people he was around. He was the perfect American. Right. So I loved him.
Yeah, he kept asking him to speak in English, right? That was. Yep. I kept thinking to myself, why would you like? This is a crime boss. This isn't like a restaurant you're at asking somebody. This guy could have you shot. You probably. Yep. But he seemed a little clueless to some of the peril that his behavior might put him in. I just like that the guy from the Mayhem commercials was sort of being subjected to mayhem-like things in the film. You know what I mean? It was,
on brand.
Yeah, it was very odd, but it was a good use. It could have been ridiculous. I've always been curious about that guy, and the only other thing I've seen him in is 30 Rock, I think.
Yeah, I was going to 30 Rock. It's the boyfriend in that.
Yeah,
the beeper salesman.
Yeah, he was perfect in that.
Technology is circular. Beepers are going to come back.
But I felt like here I got to know the actor more. I was like, oh, like I'm really enjoying this guy in this role. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because in the Mayhem commercials, he's just there for a few seconds. It's not enough to really want to.
And it goes back to every character being so memorable in this movie. And like even some things that aren't characters kind of feel like characters. Like, for example, all of the action scenes are really unique, not just in the way that John Wick approaches them or in the location, but like the whole thing is really distinct and unique things happen in it. I remember each action scene and the stakes and like the peril levels for all the characters. It's very few action movies do that. Like Die Hard did that. And I can't think of a lot of other ones that did that, where I was just like, oh, I remember this iconic action scene.
Police Story kind of does that. Police Story, the first one was a little bit like that. I'd have to watch it again, but it's my memory. I even liked the dance floor action sequence, which normally is like my least favorite in a movie. I don't like the moment that beat comes on and the character's moving through the crowd. I tend to get annoyed, and here it actually worked. They made
it's so relatable, He's pushing people aside and shooting the ones that get in his way. Like that's exactly how I want to be on a dance floor. Thank you, John Wick. I feel
I just felt there was a little more going. Like they were kind of commenting on some of the people's lack of awareness of what was going on in this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I felt like it was more from my point of view, whereas normally when I see that scene, it's normally from like the ravers' point of view. Do you know what I mean? It's like a different perspective. And nothing against ravers. I'm just not in that world. So when I see those scenes in those movies, I often feel like, oh man, they forced that club scene into this action movie so they could have a cool, heavy bass moment in the, and they do that here, but it just worked.
Yeah, I will say that as a guy that knows a lot about the rave club scene, I'm on the outside too, but I've got friends who are into it. People getting shot in the club and everyone just continuing to dance, that's scans. That's about right.
I mean, either way, I thought it was fun that you could see the lack of awareness in some people's eyes as there's like gunfire going on around them.
The fact that you even hear it is miraculous. So
yeah. Well, I loved too, like Adam was saying, the structure of that place. Like it has this basement, like the VIP area where there's like a lot of shady stuff going on. It's, I mean, I think it was supposed to be kind of like a Russian bathhouse. Actually, that was my sense of it. Yeah, and so I thought that was kind of cool because then they have this other, just like random muscular guy that gets in John Wick's way, but he's so strong, he like it's almost like his muscles are absorbing the bullet impacts, and he has to shoot him in the head.
That was a fun scene because, like, again, it goes back to like Keanu Reeves as a physical presence. He seems solid and wiry and capable, but he's not like huge. Like that dude's huge. That guy was like a tank. And so the scene where like he's standing up. And he's walking out of the pool area, so he's on a lower step, so he's the same height as John, even though he's like a foot and a half under him. Like, that was a fun moment of like, okay, so maybe John isn't great because he's physically intimidating. Maybe he's just really good at taking people apart. So I liked that. That was a cool little moment.
Well, on John Wick's physique, I actually really, and I think he does get bigger as the movies go on. Just sort of tends to happen in franchises like this. I could be wrong, but I rather like his physique because I feel like he definitely is physically fit, but he's not like a bodybuilder. Do you know what I mean? And I think too often action movies, and I like the Arnold movies and stuff like that, but I also really like Dirty Harry where he's not a bodybuilder either. Do you know what I mean? He's, Clint Eastwood is really tall. He's a big guy. Yeah. But he's lean. He's very lean and, still fit and all the rest. But, this is obviously a guy, he's mostly using guns anyways. And when he is using martial arts or whatever, he's using something like judo where he's using leverage and all this kind of stuff. But he's also not.
He's leverage. Yeah.
Yeah.
a lot of movies just do the thing where it's like, okay, this character, he's going to throw this 200-pound character over his head, and it's like your eyes just don't buy it. You see that in movies all the time. They never do that in this movie. It's like he's fighting a big guy, he's going to fight it the way a smaller guy would fight a big guy.
Well, and that's why that scene is so good, because when that muscular guy comes out of the water, they don't just have him throw the guy. He's a real problem for Keanu in that moment.
Yes.
He manages to overcome him, but it's like he's an annoyance that he can't really just dismiss. And so, I think they do a good job with that. But yeah, and Keanu Reeves not so lean that it lacks believability. He looks like he's capable. He just looks more like a normal person. Like he has almost like a construction worker's body or something.
Yeah.
Right? Just like that kind of physique. So
I think electrician build. Yeah.
Yeah. Just like, he does physical stuff, but he's not like oiling himself up and going onto a stage and like flexing. So, but I thought that they did a good job with that kind of stuff in this film. But yeah, I don't know. This is, again, I think that, it's just I bitch a lot about modern movies on this podcast, so I feel like
we all
I owe people to praise this movie, because it really is like an example of a good modern action movie.
Oh yeah, this is the gold standard for modern action. I'm amazed I slept on this for so long.
Yeah,
and it was influential. I think there are a number of other movies that came out after that were trying to do what this movie did. But yeah, and it's almost, in a way, because it's a franchise, I feel like it's a little bit like America's Ip Man movies. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it just feels a little bit like that. I mean, that's obviously a different thing. At some point, I would really love us to do the Ip Man movies. I don't think have we ever done any of them on the podcast?
Yeah,
no,
I've done it. I've done the first Ip Man movie.
We did the first one. Okay.
We haven't run the series, so that's.
Oh yeah, I would really love to go through the whole. I made my mom watch them all recently. I discovered that she likes Donnie Yen, so I could get her to watch any Donnie Yen movie I wanted to. So we watched that. We watched Wuxia. We watched I forget what other ones, but I put her through a slew of them. But yeah, she's always, whenever we would watch, she'd look at me and go, "I love Donnie Yen. He's such a nice man."
Such a nice man.
Yeah. But yeah, no, this is a great movie, and I tend to think of the franchise like that. To me, it's like Ip Man is like a really good, sort of modern, Chinese martial arts movie, and this is a really good modern American action movie franchise. I do think this is the best installment. I don't know if you guys will feel the same way. A lot of people like some of the later movies. My feeling with the later movies, and again, maybe my mind will change when we review them and I see them again, but my feeling is they kind of adopt too much of a Matrix aesthetic in the later versions. I mean, it's not like watching the Matrix movies, but there is sort of a little bit more of a Matrix aesthetic. They even bring more this movie has actors from the Matrix, but Lawrence Fishburne is like in the sequels and stuff, so it just starts to feel a little bit more of that vibe. Also, I think the world building gets a little bit overly expansive for my taste in some of the later movies. They're still great movies, but I really like the world building in this one. I like that there's that central relationship between the Russian mobster and John Wick. That just really works for me, and everything kind of resolves around them. There's not much of a broader world for them to contend with. So I think that it's, even though it's a big, sprawling criminal underworld, there's a focus to it. But yeah, I don't know. I think I own this one, because when I went on Prime to watch it, it was free. So I'm pretty sure that's because I own it, unless it's just on Prime, and I'm not really sure. But you can see it on Prime. I don't know, where'd you guys manage to find it?
I saw it.
I don't remember.
Yeah,
Peacock. That's right. I watched.
So you need a prescription, not a prescription, a subscription.
Yeah.
I got a prescription
to your doctor
and
get a prescription.
Get a prescription for John Wick. Yes. Yeah. No, I got Peacock because the Five Nights at Freddy movie was on. The Five Nights at Freddy's movie was on it, and I had to watch it with my kids. So I was like, I got it anyway. Let's see what movies are on here. And John Wick was one of the first ones. Like, hell yes.
Okay.
So yeah, no, this is a little plug for Peacock. Speaking of plugs, we forgot to do our 12 days of Fistmas plug.
I know.
We suck.
But
this is the second day of Fistmas. So I will once again plug my game, Acid and Steel, coming out February is what I'm aiming for. It's demons and robots in the post-apocalypse. Good luck with that, folks.
And with that, we will head out, and we'll be back on next time with I guess the third day of Fistmas. I don't know what movie we're going to do yet.
Third day of Fistmas.
And until next time, we will talk to you later.